So I'm very excited to be on the stage here today with you, Jeremy. Jeremy Francis, Chief Operating Officer for Genworth.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
Yeah, absolutely, and appreciate you making the time. I understand you had a big board meeting this morning. You look very dapper and sorted, so I assume you fared that very well?
Yeah, I think so. Everyone just wants to talk about cyber at the moment, so I'm hoping we're going to avoid that topic today.
No, I mean, okay. If it's your favorite wish, I mean, we can bring it up. So, no, but please introduce yourself, and if you could tell us a little bit more about your organization.
Thanks, Jeremy Francis, Chief Operating Officer at Genworth. Genworth is a really interesting business. We kicked off in an initial form in 1965, and we're a company that the government initially set up. And it's fascinating because we think of today some of the challenges that Australians have getting into homes and the fact that our house price and the property market's got so expensive. But when you look back on the heritage of Genworth, even in 1965, when houses were around $12,000, Australians still had exactly the same issue, that it was really difficult to save up the money for a deposit to get into a house. And today we know that it can take somewhere between 14 and 16 years for Aussies to save up that 20% that's required to get into a home. And so Genworth is really in the business of helping Australians satisfy their home ownership dreams.
That's incredible. Well, you know, in my opening was very intentional. When you start thinking about all these different insurance products and the commercial off-the-shelf, software that's very purpose-built. You think about the bank side. Can you help me, kind of understand your evaluation? Because I can't imagine there was a single COT solution that fit what you do.
No, we're sort of like, you've got a road bike that goes really fast and it works really well on concrete, and then you've got the mountain bike that's great in the bush, but it's a bit slow. And we're the hybrid, right? We need the capabilities of the insurance industry, but actually our customer base are banks and lenders, and so we need something in between. Genworth operate in a market where our competitor group is very small, and so there aren't any software companies out there looking to provide a solution for lenders' mortgage insurance. And so in comes Appian, right? This is the place where Appian's played really well. We had, for our claims part of our business, a system that was built for general insurance. So for life insurance and health insurance, it was fantastic. But when it came for mortgage insurance, it really didn't do what we needed. And so we did what a lot of companies have done over the years, and we took that system built for something else, and we abused it, and we came up with something that we thought would work, and of course it was a Frankenstein. That's right. What we've been able to do with Appian, which has been fantastic, is say, there is nothing that exists for lenders' mortgage insurance, so let's build it ourselves. And I think coming from much larger organisations, that idea is horrifying. How could you possibly do that? And I think the experience that I've had in other organisations where we've looked at Appian, and when I occasionally go and talk to Appian prospects about my experiences with Appian, there's this sort of disbelief, because the technology has got so good, but there's this sort of corporate inertia where, the history of building big monolithic systems and getting them off the shelf still holds people's thinking back. Yeah,
it certainly does. And it feels like that's what everybody knows, right?
That's right.
So in the context of trying something different, do you want to be the tip of the spear, or do you want to wait until there's a few more that go in front of you? So I applaud you for that leadership and that initiative, because that's really what makes the change. And so, when you think about some of the challenges that you went through as an organization, or some of the challenges in this unique product space, can you kind of describe for the audience, how you approach that? And I mean, software doesn't always fix everything, right? But how has the software kind of helped you as far as bridging the two together?
Yeah, look, I think like most organizations, the CEO and the board want everything, right? And they expect everything from technology. And, Genworth are no different. We want to take the product set that we do today and innovate it, but at the same time, we want to move into all these different spaces. And so our challenge is, we want to build a claims system, or we want to build an underwriting system, but we don't just want to build it for what we do today. We want to build it in a way that we can then extend it in lots of different ways. And we actually don't even know what some of those directions are yet, right? Because companies with a growth strategy want to be open to opportunities. And so, that's one of the great things, again, about Appian, is that you can you can design it knowing that it's going to have that flexibility for the future, so that you're not constraining yourself when the business decides to do something slightly different.
Absolutely. And speaking of, the current global economic conditions in the context of, the opportunity, the challenges, I don't want to, diminish that. Certainly they're there. But can you speak to the organizational agility that this provides you, some of those, kind of unique nuances, if you will?
Yeah, I think it's about being in a position where we can test something really quickly, turn it around, provide opportunities, and move really fast on it. And that's not just for us, that's particularly true for our customers. We're a B2B organization, so a lot of the solutions we're providing are integrated into banks and lenders across Australia, and so when they want to move, we need to move really quickly as well, and that's a challenge. And I spent some time at Pepper Money, who are also an Appian customer. In fact, I think a lot of what we did at Pepper, I've now gone to Genworth and done 3 times better than what it was at Pepper. I think we've seen through Pepper, through that sort of banking environment, the challenges that they have, and they're now customers of mine as part of Genworth.
That's incredible. Well, I promised you cyber, so let's kind of make use of it. In our CEO keynote this morning, Matt talked about how there's been 4 major incidents, 4 firms. There was one article I was reading, it was an individual that described it as almost a breach a week, which is unfortunate in the amount of data that's been exposed in those impacts. Can you speak to how operationally, I'm sure you're, of course, no different in operational impact. Can you speak to how that's affecting your organization?
Yeah, look, I think it's just making us reflect a lot harder on what we're doing, and as we see some of the experiences coming out of organisations like Optus and Medibank, we go back and we look at the partners that we're dealing with, in particular Appian, and I think when you've chosen the right partners and you go and look at their security credentials, you look at the way that Appian's been working with US government organisations whose benchmark is so high. We have a really high benchmark in the Australian industry as well, particularly in financial services and insurance with our regulator APRA. It's nice to be able to stand in front of a board and an executive team and explain that the companies we're dealing with take security just as seriously as we do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Integrity is incredible. Well, thinking about it from an operational perspective, I have to think that it's process heavy, and you strike this balance between not being too operationally heavy on your customers, and you're primarily a B2B model, I believe. And so how do you strike that balance between not increasing the level of effort too far, but getting the system be more of the solution instead of the barrier?
Yeah, I think that's where we've been able to get a lot of benefit from actually working with Appian themselves. It's easy to sort of take those things away and start to build your own systems and then go, okay, we've got this now, but actually Appian are dealing with customers all across the world, and we want to tie into that experience and
best practices.
Yeah, exactly right. I asked you the other day about the insurance industry over in the US and what you guys are experiencing and seeing, and there's some similar themes, but there's also some differences, right?
There are, and the benefit of that is that what may work in one part of the world may be different, but yet somewhat related. And if you look at the unique opportunity you were describing, with how the product is so unique, how it's very bespoke, but yet others are working on it. I noticed there was a recent announcement. You took a 22% stake in a home equity provider. I was curious if, from an innovation perspective, if you could elaborate on that, because that's quite innovative.
Yeah, we've made a couple of recent investments, and part of it is a big technology play. One of the organisations we bought have invested in blockchain technology that underpins the solution. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is look for more ways for Australians to get into homes. And the reason we're looking at equity release is because mums and dads in this country are funding the younger generation to get into homes. That's just a reality of it. Here they're the 4th or 5th largest bank, depending on what media organisation you read. And so the challenge that mums and dads have today is that all of their money is locked up in their home. So they're cash poor, but asset rich. So if we're in a position where we can start to help them get some of that equity out of their house, whether that's to help themselves or to help their kids get into the home, we start to build that cycle of home ownership, and we want to be part of that and helping Australians.
Yeah, it's a very unique time, right? When you think about how the inflation aspect of it. You think about the home mortgage prices just continue to go up, and it prices a generation out of it. So that's incredible that you're able to unlock that.
Yeah. And what are you seeing in the US in terms of the same, the property market? Is it challenged in the US as well? And have we got customers over there that are?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's very similar in that regard, where you've seen prices just continue to go up. You see from the inflationary side, from a claims perspective, that used to be that it was frequency was down, severity was up, and now you see both frequency and severity. And so from a real estate price perspective, layer that on with the inflation, and the houses are just staying at a level. One quote, I believe, was the Wall Street Journal, said that there was no fundamental reason, statistically or financially, why homes should be at the value they are. And so that just starts to create, and I can speak, my oldest son and his wife are in that example where at about this age, we were in a different spot. So being able to unlock that equity is an incredible opportunity that's very unique, and I haven't seen that. So
we should talk about Appian a bit more though, right?
Yeah, certainly.
I was looking at some of the other sessions that have been held today, and it struck me that we're talking a lot about data. And I missed the fascinating talk on data fabric. I'm sure it was fascinating.
It was incredible.
And I think going back to that cyber piece, we're looking at data so much because organizations want to try and extract value from data. They want to use it to grow, to provide products and services. They want to be able to get insights on their own business. I think where the power of data fabric and low-code data is going to really start to point us to is not just to those pursuits, but also to how we can better protect data.
Yes.
How we can understand data and how we can make sure that we're protecting the needs of Australians and of course, the global population. And so, what I'd like to see is those conversations start to point a little bit more in that direction, because I think those two things they're not first and second order priorities now, they're equal priorities. Yeah,
no, going back to that article I was referring to, it was fascinating that we were interviewing this hacker of 25 years ago, and how he was talking about how fundamentally a lot of the same paper, and I heard someone this morning coin the term straight to paper versus straight through processing. I hadn't heard that before, so shout out. And it's incredible how from that perspective we don't elevate and leverage all the tools available to really unlock that data, especially with that focus on security first. All those disparate sources, insurance, financial services, of course, growth through acquisition, multiple acquisitions, which just makes the spider web larger.
Agree.
I agree. There's an opportunity there.
I think also a lot of the audience that we've got here are part of the developer community, and if I think about the parts of organizations that are so critical to protecting privacy, it's developers, right? And it's not the first area that executives think about, because they think of their cyber team and maybe their data team. But as we've seen through Medibank and Optus and all of the recent experiences in the Australian press, the developers have such a big role to play on protecting the organization. And I think we've still got a way to go. And I think, when you've got tools like Appian, where the focus becomes less about how can I be this hardcore dev and actually think about what are the problems that I'm solving in my business.
That's right.
Cyber is one of those problems, right?
It is.
So I think we're in an environment where we can start to bring broader developer skill sets in, and I don't mean development skill sets. I mean broader staff skill sets.
Staff skill sets, as well as from a platform as a service perspective. Being able to take all those best-in-class components, put it together under the platform where the developer can really focus on the application, the benefits, and to your point, that security aspect. And maybe that's a good segue. I would be curious, from a talent perspective, and by the way, to the technical audience here, we'll leave 5 minutes at the end of really, really hard questions for Jeremy. But be curious if there's been any kind of talent challenges or, any kind of, situations you had to overcome as shortages in contrast to, say, high code, traditional code, staff.
Yeah, look, I'd be amazed if there's anyone in the audience that hasn't felt the pain of the supply of skills in the market. Certainly in the APJ market, it's been really challenging. And you get two outcomes in my experience with skill sets when it comes to Appian. The first is when you start to bring Appian into an organization, people leave. And those people tend to be the developers that really just only care about the craft and nothing else. And I'm okay for those people to leave, right?
Yeah.
They also tend to be the more expensive developers. The people that stay and the people that start to join the organisation, they're not as worried about are they the best technical people in the world. They're wanting to get outcomes for the business and ideally outcomes for our customers, and so that's a huge benefit for our organisation. And what we've found certainly at Genworth is we've got people in my teams now that are really close to the products that we're building in Appian, and they don't all have technical backgrounds, and they're amazing. They're really good, right?
Yeah. One of the customers that I like to highlight, we were just there yesterday, uses design thinking. I don't know if you're familiar with design thinking from the Stanford Design Lab, D School, and it's incredible when you don't have to put the barrier of technology in the way. You can put people of common goal, common interest together in the same room and say, if you had no barriers, what would that incredible output be? And I agree with you. It's fascinating to see all those line up. And again, software doesn't always solve culture, but when you see those alignments and you see a platform that enables and enhances versus complicating that, certainly does a difference.
No, absolutely. I think Appian are going to go and do more hackathons. I think that they've got this unfair advantage when you sit down and you try and solve business problems and see if you can build something in a day. Appian are always going to win that, right?
I'd like to think so. Yeah. And we have kind of back to the global aspect. We have a customer in France, Aviva, and they do a reverse hackathon. So they pitch out to the business community, and the technical community. They have a business problem and they pitch out there to say, how would you solve this? They wait for those ideas to come back, and then their internal development team goes and builds them within Appian. And it's really an incredible opportunity. You may fail fast, but hey, you failed, and now what does work, and you pivot to that.
I think what's exciting, seen at the conference this morning, is that the Australian and APG environment is starting to grow its customer base really well, right? And that's big for a lot of the organisations here who have been using Appian for some time. That you've got other Australian organisations. I see Westpac are up there today. I think that's fantastic that we've got one of the major players in the financial services industry now, using Appian in anger.
Certainly.
I think it's fantastic, and and they'll push Appian to do some things differently as well. And a lot of the organisations here will get some of the benefits of that.
Absolutely, and testament to Luke and the team, and we talked about some of the partnerships specific to insurance or financial services that we can see, or healthcare for that matter. And we really expect that to continue to diversify and just create additional value without having to take on the headache of doing that yourself. It's all bundled into the platform, so it's incredible that way.
And how much growth are you seeing in the US market with Appian now?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, it's very similar in the sense that especially when you look at the speed, you look at the need to go fast, but do it in a heavily regulated environment. And not to pick on the individual development kind of mindset, but when you start taking those that are passionate about that, contrast that to a single SKU, a single platform that takes care of all the speed, all the agility, the security, we're seeing that mindset really start to really take hold. We also have a number of insurers and healthcare institutions, believe it or not, that are still very much on premise. And when they look at making that leap to the cloud, do you want to do that with a startup or with somebody that doesn't have that tried and true, or you want to do someone that's an expert in the space with all the federal kind of the federal high trust and FedRAMP and stuff that you noted? That's very distinguished as well, and I believe that's what continues to yield our success in that regard too.
Yeah, and certainly in Australia, a lot of the regulators across different industries are still looking at on-prem and cloud as as a differentiator in terms of risk. And I think what's becoming much more evident, and you certainly see this with some of the way that Appian's thought about security, is that it's a capability that you can put across the environment that's more important now than the environment itself. And so I'm hoping that across the globe we're going to start to see that play out a little bit more, and we get a bit smarter about how we think about cyber.
As well as being able to be more nimble and respond to those much more quickly.
Right.
We saw through the early days of the pandemic in the States especially, just how quickly the fraud rings, syndicate fraud rings, pursuing workers' comp and other, fraudulent claims, and just how fast they could move in contrast to how some of the, especially at the state entity level, struggle. So
I went over to the Appian conference in the States a few years back with one of my ex-colleagues, Royce, and what fascinated me was that when you go to the US, you expect that all these organizations over there are going to be so innovative and ahead of the pack, right? And actually what you realize is that a lot of them are very large organization, and they're actually slow moving. And what you notice about the Australian market is that the larger organizations and the small organizations here are actually often doing a lot more with Appian and other technologies than the US market is doing. And what are you seeing that's particularly innovative at the moment in the US, now that I've just dissed the whole country?
Yeah, no pressure there at all. Yeah. So, hi, Mom. It's interesting in the context. We have several customers that liken it to steering a cargo ship versus steering a speedboat. And certainly, fundamentally, we can accept that would be more difficult. Yet, if you crank it and turn and the rudder turns, and I realize that's much easier said than done. But we are really seeing that mindset be challenged. You're seeing more leaders from, say, banking, or for some of those smaller mid-sized firms, start to take senior leader roles within some of these larger insurance institutions, bringing in just talent that doesn't know or necessarily appreciate, frankly, the problem of being large and going slow. And that's been particularly interesting when you see all these organizations with the silos, 7 acquisitions and 7 core admin systems and 17 CRMs and those kinds of things. So in summary, what we're seeing is that just won't work. We're also seeing, from an intermediate perspective, long-term traditional insurers that have an agent broker model are really now starting to rethink, because of the cost basis, but how they keep that brand as well as preserve their legacy while also doing things differently. And absolutely, that's been a success area for us to go in and help them preserve that at scale, be highly differentiated and very unique, yet also very relevant from a cost and a slimming margin perspective. So maybe with a few minutes left here, last for you, as far as any kind of future transformation plans, digital transformation plans you'd like to share?
Yeah, we've just really replaced most of our core operating platforms, right? And so we're now moving from setting foundations up into the exciting bit, right? And so Genworth has this really great growth strategy about moving into different markets, staying really close to our vision and principles of helping Australians with their home ownership journey. And so the next 2 years, we're looking for Appian to be that springboard to really move into so many other spaces in this industry, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We're proud to be there with you, and can't thank you enough for your customer patronage and to let us be part of that journey with you.
Fantastic.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, let's take a few really hard questions for Jim, if you will, please. Don't disappoint. So, questions? There's a roving microphone. Over here? Oh, I don't know, maybe I got that wrong. Oh, here on the left.
Well done, Jeremy. Stu here.
Hey, Stu.
Wondering, with the agility of the Appian platform, what techniques have you seen effective in making sure the organisation is as agile as its technology?
Yeah, we've probably had the opposite issue. I think the organisation... It's funny how so many companies have got used to implementing commercial off-the-shelf solutions and feel that there's some safety in that, even though they're the projects that have failed the most historically, right? Our issue has been we've put Appian in, and the team have just been so keen to have something that actually does what it says, that we've almost moved a little bit too fast. And so the challenge that we've had is trying to make sure we bring the rest of the organisation on that journey and help sort of expand the corporate attention span, if you like, so that there's an understanding now that actually you can do things quickly and it's okay, and it doesn't mean that we're cutting corners. And we do have the right safety mechanisms in place to make sure that, yes, we're in an industry that's highly regulated and we need to be really careful with the way that we do things. So agility hasn't been a problem. I think, when you've got a good organisation with really good people in it that want to succeed, it's amazing what you can do, and it's just making sure you bring everyone else along on that journey.
Good question.
Hi, yeah, Jamie here. I guess coming from Pepper Money and then going to Genworth, you've had the luxury to try to implement Appian twice. What are your key learnings from there? And I guess because you've been able to do it once and you sort of learnt everything, what did you bring to Genworth to sort of understand how to do it better, how to implement, and how to do it, I guess, cleaner the second time?
Well, it certainly helped with negotiating with Keith and Luke. That made a lot easier. I knew all the tricks, all the sales tricks that they would try this time. No, thanks, Jamie. It's a good question. Funnily, look, I made a couple of the same mistakes twice. I mean, it's never nice to admit that, but what I was talking about earlier around bringing the organisation along the journey, it's easy to forget that people still don't accept that you can do what Appian allows you to do. It's phenomenal, right? Like it doesn't make sense to me, but it's amazing how that can really slow you down. What we did, what I learned at Pepper was the best way to sell a business case is to bring Appian in, give them a problem for a week, let the executive know that you're doing that work, and then show them a working product that the team have only had a week to do. You could spend 3 months writing a business case with all this great text and paper and all that sort of stuff, but when you can actually show the exec a week's worth of work on Appian and let them go through that journey themselves and appreciate how powerful it is, it's a much faster way to sell. And so the time frame to get to start work at Genworth has been a lot shorter because of that learning.
Yeah,
cool. Thank you. It's
incredible when you think about the Appian customer success teams, all the valuable partners. It really is incredible when you go in the room and you see this group we've always done it that way. It was my favorite saying as CIO to say, okay, and then I had a book, not my book, but Sacred Cows Make the Best Hamburger. I don't know if you've ever read that.
No.
And it's so incredible to your point to walk in and see just that mindset be blown. It's like, that's my vision. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So yeah, it's incredible. Well, one more question, otherwise we can wrap up. Any more? Last call. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Jeremy Francis, COO of Genworth. Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, mate.